powerful tech mogul Camille Ashworth commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals with ruthless precision. Her empire built on innovation and an iron will that never showed weakness. But when she discovered the night janitor, Rune Beckett, reading advanced programming books during his break and helping his young son with homework in the empty conference room, something shifted in her carefully controlled world. He was just the invisible man who emptied trash cans and mopped floors, a single father working multiple jobs to support his brilliant boy, completely unnoticed by everyone in the gleaming corporate tower. Yet this quiet, dedicated man possessed a mind that could solve problems her top engineers couldn't crack, and a heart that would challenge everything she thought she knew about success, worth, and love. What started as curiosity about the janitor, who shouldn't have been able to understand complex algorithms, would become a scandalous romance that threatened to tear apart her empire, defy every social expectation, and prove that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary people in the most unexpected places. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The 42nd floor of Nexus Tower pierced the Seattle skyline like a gleaming steel arrow, and at its apex sat Camille Ashworth's corner office, a monument to technological innovation and corporate dominance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Elliott Bay, while the interior showcased a carefully curated blend of cutting-edge minimalism and strategic power positioning. Every detail, from the custom Italian leather furniture to the holographic displays showcasing real-time global market data, reinforced a singular message. Camille Ashworth was not just successful, she was unstoppable. At 34, Camille had already revolutionized the tech industry twice over. Her first breakthrough came during her Stanford PhD program when she developed a quantum encryption algorithm that every major government and corporation now licensed. Her second triumph was founding Ashtec Industries, which had grown from a garage startup to a $15 billion empire in just 8 years. Today, her company's artificial intelligence systems powered everything from autonomous vehicles to space exploration missions, and her name appeared on Forbes covers with the same frequency as tech titans who had decades more experience. Camille moved through her world with the precision of someone who had never known failure. This particular Tuesday morning found her reviewing quarterly projections, while simultaneously managing 3 conference calls across different time zones. Her assistant, Teresa Dixon, had already briefed her on the day's schedule: a presentation to potential investors at 9, a product development meeting at 11, lunch with the mayor regarding the city's smart infrastructure initiative, and a board meeting that would likely determine the fate of their latest acquisition. The Tokyo team is reporting a 12% increase in user engagement, Teresa announced, sliding a tablet across Camille's desk. The London office wants approval for the new hire requisitions, and the venture capital firm is requesting another meeting about the healthcare AI project. Camille barely looked up from her multiple monitors, her fingers dancing across holographic keyboards with practiced efficiency. She wore her signature black blazer, her auburn hair pulled back, in a style that was both professional and subtly intimidating. Everything about her appearance was calculated, from her choice to wear flat shoes that still made her tower over most colleagues, to the minimalist jewelry that suggested confidence without ostentation. Tokyo gets the green light for expansion. London can have their hires, but they need to justify every position with measurable ROI projections. And tell the VC firm that healthcare AI isn't just a project anymore, it's going to be our next billion-dollar division. Camille replied without missing a beat, her eyes scanning through lines of code that scrolled across her primary screen. This was Camille's element, the constant flow of decisions, the weight of responsibility for thousands of employees worldwide, the thrill of competing in markets where billions of dollars shifted based on quarterly earnings reports and breakthrough. Innovations. She thrived on the pressure that would crush most executives, finding energy in the relentless pace that defined life at the top of the tech hierarchy. Yet for all her professional fulfillment, Camille's personal life remained strategically compartmentalized. Her penthouse apartment in Belltown was as perfectly curated as her office gorgeous, efficient, and remarkably empty of anything that suggested genuine human connection. Her relationships had always been secondary to her ambitions, carefully managed arrangements with equally successful individuals who understood that career came first. Romance, she had learned early, was often incompatible with the kind of focused determination required to build an empire. Her family had initially been supportive of her academic and early professional achievements, but as Ashtec Industries grew, their pride had gradually transformed into concern. Her parents, comfortable professionals from Portland, worried that their daughter had sacrificed too much in pursuit of success. Her younger sister, a social worker, regularly expressed bewilderment at Camille's 70-hour work weeks and apparent inability to slow down long enough to build meaningful personal relationships. "When was the last time you took a real vacation?" her sister had asked during their last phone conversation. "I mean a vacation where you didn't check email or take calls or review reports." Camille had laughed off the question, but privately, she couldn't remember the last time she had experienced genuine relaxation. Even her sleep was optimized 8 hours precisely, tracked by biometric devices, with meditation apps designed to maximize REM cycles. She approached personal wellness with the same systematic efficiency she brought to business strategy. The irony wasn't lost on her that someone who had built artificial intelligence systems designed to understand and predict human behavior had somehow managed to optimize the humanity out of her own existence. Her AI programs could recognize emotional patterns in millions of users, could predict relationship compatibility with remarkable accuracy, could even generate personalized content. That moved people to tears or laughter. Yet Camille herself had become increasingly disconnected from the messy, unpredictable aspects of human emotion that made life genuinely meaningful. By 7 in the evening, as most of her executive team headed home to families and social commitments, Camille remained in her office reviewing proposals for the company's next major venture. The cleaning crews would begin their work soon, moving through the building like invisible phantoms who ensured that every morning brought pristine workspaces, ready for another day of innovation and competition. Camille rarely paid attention to the maintenance staff. They were part of the infrastructure, as essential and as unnoticed as the climate control systems or the fiber optic networks that kept her technological empire running smoothly. She knew their work was important in an abstract sense, but they existed in a completely different sphere from her world of strategic planning and market disruption. Tonight, however, would be different. Tonight, the carefully constructed boundaries of Camille Ashworth's perfectly controlled existence would encounter something she had never anticipated, never planned for, and certainly never optimized. A single father named Rune Beckett, whose quiet dedication and hidden brilliance would challenge every assumption she had made about success, worth, and what it truly meant to build something meaningful. It was nearly 9:30 when Camille finally decided to call it a night. The building had grown quiet around her, the usual hum of activity replaced by the soft whisper of ventilation systems and the distant sound of elevator machinery. Most of Ashtec's employees had departed hours ago, leaving behind only the security guards and the overnight cleaning crew who would restore the building to its pristine morning condition. Camille gathered her things with practiced efficiency, slipping her laptop into its custom leather case and checking her phone for any urgent messages that might require her attention during the drive home. She had learned long ago that the technology industry never truly slept while Seattle wound down for the evening. Teams in Tokyo and Mumbai were just beginning their workdays, and breakthrough innovations didn't pause for convenient time zones. As she made her way toward the executive elevator, A soft glow caught her attention from the direction of Conference Room 7, one of the larger meeting spaces typically used for client presentations and board gatherings. The room should have been empty and dark at this hour, yet warm light spilled from beneath the frosted glass doors, accompanied by quiet voices that seemed oddly out of place in the building's evening stillness. Camille paused, her curiosity piqued. Security protocols were strict at Ashtec. No unauthorized personnel should have access to the conference rooms after hours, and any legitimate late-night meetings would have appeared on the building's scheduling system. Her first instinct was to contact security, but something about the gentle, patient tone of the voices made her hesitate. Moving closer to investigate, Camille could make out two figures through the translucent glass, an adult and a much smaller form seated at the massive conference table. The larger figure was hunched over what appeared to be books and papers, while the smaller one, clearly a young person, sat cross-legged on one of the executive chairs, swinging legs that didn't quite reach the floor. Remember, Jasper, when you're working with recursive functions, you need to think about the base. Case first, came a deep, patient voice. What's the simplest version of this problem that we can solve directly? Camille froze. Recursive functions. That was advanced computer science terminology, graduate level, programming concepts that even some of her junior developers struggled with. Who was conducting a programming tutorial in her conference room at nearly 10 o'clock at night? Carefully, she approached the door and peered through the narrow gap where the frosted glass met the frame. What she saw challenged every assumption she might have made about the evening's activities. A man in his early 30s sat at the head of the conference table, wearing the navy blue uniform of the building's cleaning staff. His name tag read Rune Beckett, and beside him sat a cart filled with cleaning supplies, spray bottles, microfiber cloths, and industrial vacuum attachments. But spread across the polished conference table were textbooks, notebooks filled with handwritten code, and what appeared to be advanced mathematics workbooks. The young boy, who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, was intently focused on a laptop screen, his small fingers moving confidently across the keyboard as he typed lines of code. His resemblance to the man was unmistakable. The same dark hair, the same intelligent eyes, the same look of intense concentration. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I think I understand, Dad, the boy said, his voice bright with excitement. So the recursive function calls itself with a smaller version of the problem until it gets to something simple enough to solve directly. Exactly, Jasper, Rune replied, his face lighting up with pride. You're getting it faster than most college students do. Now, can you show me how that would work with the Fibonacci sequence? Camille watched, transfixed, as the janitor, a man she had never truly noticed despite his presence in her building for what must have been months or even years, guided his son through programming concepts that required sophisticated mathematical thinking. Rune's explanations were clear, patient, and remarkably sophisticated. He wasn't just parroting textbook definitions. He demonstrated a deep, intuitive understanding of complex algorithmic principles. Why don't we take a break? Rune suggested, glancing at his watch. You've been working hard, and I need to finish cleaning this floor before we head home. As Jasper stretched and rubbed his eyes, Camille caught sight of the books scattered across the table. Advanced Data Structures and Algorithms, Machine Learning, A Probabilistic Perspective, Introduction to Quantum Computing, texts that represented the cutting edge of computer science research, the kind of material that her own senior engineers consulted when tackling particularly challenging problems. Dad, when I grow up, I want to build AI systems like the ones they make here, Jasper said, gesturing vaguely toward the Ashtec logos visible on the conference room walls. Do you think I could work for a company like this someday? Rune's expression shifted, becoming more complex. Pride mingled with something that looked like longing, perhaps even regret. You can do anything you set your mind to, Jasper. You're already smarter than most adults I know. But remember, it's not just about being smart. It's about working hard, treating people with respect, and never giving up on your dreams, even when things get difficult. Like you do, Jasper said simply, and Camille felt something twist in her chest at the absolute trust and admiration in the young boy's voice. I try my best, buddy, Rune replied softly. Now, how about you work on that math homework while I get these floors cleaned? We need to be out of here by 11 so you can get enough sleep for school tomorrow. As Rune stood and began organizing his cleaning supplies, Camille finally got a clear look at his face. He was younger than she had initially assumed, with intelligent eyes and features that suggested both determination and kindness. There was something in his posture, a quiet dignity despite his circumstances, that made her reconsider every assumption she had ever made about the invisible workforce that kept her building running. But what struck her most powerfully was the obvious love between father and son, the way Jasper looked at Rune with complete faith and admiration, and the gentle patience with which Rune had guided his son through complex academic material. This wasn't just a janitor bringing his son to work out of necessity. This was a devoted father creating educational opportunities wherever he could find them, using advanced textbooks that suggested intellectual capabilities far beyond what his current employment would indicate. Camille stood there for several more minutes, watching as Rune efficiently cleaned the conference room while Jasper worked diligently on homework. The contrast was striking. A man who clearly possessed the intellectual capacity to understand graduate-level computer science, working as overnight janitorial staff, while dedicating his free moments to nurturing his son's exceptional academic potential. Questions flooded Camille's mind. How had someone with this level of technical knowledge ended up in a custodial position? What circumstances had led to a single father working night shifts while homeschooling what appeared to be a gifted young person? And why had she, someone who prided herself on recognizing talent and potential, never noticed the remarkable intelligence of someone who had been working in her building all along? As Rune and Jasper began packing up their materials, preparing to move on to the next section of the building, Camille quietly stepped back from the conference room door. But the image of the father and son remained burned in her memory, a glimpse into a world of dedication, sacrifice, and hidden brilliance that existed parallel to her own, yet completely invisible to the corporate hierarchy she had spent her life climbing. For the first time in years, Camille Ashworth found herself genuinely curious about another person's story. The following evening, Camille found herself staying late again, though this time her motivation had nothing to do with quarterly reports or strategic planning sessions. She had spent the entire day distracted, unable to focus on board meetings or investor calls, her mind returning repeatedly to the image of Rune Beckett, patiently teaching advanced algorithms to his young son in Conference Room 7. She had done something she rarely did, used her executive access to review employee records. Rune's file was surprisingly thin. Hired 18 months ago. Excellent performance reviews from the building management company. Perfect attendance record. No disciplinary actions. But there were no details about his educational background, previous employment, or personal circumstances beyond his emergency contact information, which listed only his address in the Fremont neighborhood. By 8:30, most of the building had emptied once again, and Camille made her way to the 38th floor, where she knew the cleaning crew typically began their evening rounds. She found Rune in the break room, methodically organizing supplies while Jasper sat at a small table nearby, working through what appeared to be advanced geometry problems. "Excuse me," Camille said softly, not wanting to startle them. Both father and son looked up in surprise. Rune immediately stood, his posture becoming more formal as he recognized her. "Miss Ashworth. I'm sorry, we didn't realize. Is there something you need? I can come back to clean this area later if..." "Please don't apologize," Camille interrupted, raising her hand. I was hoping I could speak with you for a moment, if you have time. Rune glanced at Jasper, then back at Camille, clearly uncertain about why the CEO of Ashtec Industries wanted to have a conversation with him. Of course, ma'am. Jasper, why don't you continue working on those problems while I talk with Ms. Ashworth? Camille noticed that Jasper watched the interaction with curious intelligence, his eyes moving between his father and her, as if trying to understand the unusual dynamics of their encounter. She could see the same quick, analytical mind that had grasped recursive function so effortlessly the night before. I have to admit, Camille began, choosing her words carefully, I happened to see you and Jasper working in conference room 7 yesterday evening. I was impressed by what I witnessed. Rune's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. I'm sorry about that, Ms. Ashworth. I know we're not supposed to use the conference rooms, but Jasper needed a quiet place to study, and I thought since the room was empty... He trailed off, clearly expecting some form of reprimand. You're not in trouble, Camille assured him quickly. Actually, I was fascinated by what you were teaching him. Those were graduate-level computer science concepts. Where did you learn advanced algorithms and machine learning theory? For a moment, Rune seemed to struggle with how much to reveal. His eyes moved toward Jasper, and Camille could see the protective instinct of a father weighing how much personal information to share with his employer. I have a PhD in computer science from MIT, Rune finally said quietly. Specialized in artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. The admission hung in the air between them. Camille felt her assumptions about class, education, and opportunity crumbling. Métis, she repeated, processing this information. And you're working as a janitor, yes, Rune confirmed, his voice carrying neither shame nor defensiveness, just factual acknowledgement. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns. May I ask what happened? Camille found herself genuinely curious, not in the way she approached business intelligence gathering, but with the kind of human interest she rarely allowed herself to feel. Rune was quiet for a long moment, glancing again at Jasper, who had looked up from his geometry problems and was listening intently to their conversation. Jasper's mother was brilliant, Rune began, his voice taking on a softer quality. Dr. Sarah Chen-Shi was a research scientist working on breakthrough treatments for rare genetic disorders. We met during graduate school, both working on applications of AI to medical research. After we graduated, she got a position at a pharmaceutical research facility in Boston, and I was doing postdoctoral work at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. Camille listened, beginning to understand that this story would explain not just Rune's current circumstances, but the obvious depth of love and dedication she had witnessed between father and son. When Jasper was 5, Sarah was diagnosed with a rare form of early-onset dementia, ironically, the same type of neurological condition she had spent her career trying to cure. The progression was rapid and devastating. Rune paused, his composure never wavering, but Camille could see the pain that still lived behind his calm exterior. I took leave from my research to care for her and Jasper. We tried experimental treatments, spent our savings on specialists, traveled to medical centers across the country. But nothing slowed the disease's progression. Sarah passed away 2 years ago. Jasper had stopped pretending to work on his geometry and was openly listening now. When he heard his mother mentioned, his expression became more solemn, but there was no signs of trauma or overwhelming sadness. Instead, Camille saw the quiet strength that seemed to characterize both father and son. After Sarah died, I had to make some difficult decisions, Rune continued. Jasper needed stability, needed to be in one place, needed his remaining parent to be present and available. My research career required long hours, extensive travel, and the kind of total focus that I couldn't give while raising a young person on my own. So you chose him, Camille said softly, understanding beginning to dawn. I chose him, Rune confirmed simply. We moved here to Seattle because the cost of living was more manageable than Boston, and I took the first stable job I could find that offered decent health insurance and would allow me to be home during the day when Jasper gets out of school. But you're brilliant, Camille said, the words coming out more emotionally than she had intended. You could be leading research teams, developing breakthrough technologies, making significant contributions to the field. Rune smiled, and for the first time in their conversation, his expression showed genuine warmth rather than polite caution. I am making significant contributions to the field, Ms. Ashworth. I'm raising the next generation of brilliant minds. Jasper is already working at a level that most college sophomores struggle with. He's kind, curious, ethically grounded, and passionate about using technology to help people. If that's not a significant contribution to the world, I don't know what is. Camille felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of values and priorities that she had somehow lost sight of in her own pursuit of success. Here was a man who had sacrificed what most people would consider a prestigious, lucrative career in order to be present for his son's development, and he spoke about it without any sense of regret or martyrdom. Besides, Rune added, his tone becoming slightly more playful, I still keep up with the research. I read every major journal, follow the latest developments in AI and machine learning, and I get to share all of that knowledge with Jasper. In some ways, I'm more connected to the cutting edge of the field now than I was when I was buried in narrow research projects. Dad knows everything about AI, Jasper interjected, his voice filled with pride. He explains things better than any of my online professors. Online professors? Camille asked. Jasper is technically homeschooled, Rune explained, but he's taking advanced courses through MIT's online programs, Stanford's distance learning initiative, and several other universities. He's working at a high school level in most subjects, college level in mathematics and computer science. Camille looked at Jasper with new understanding. This wasn't just a bright young person getting help with homework. This was a genuine prodigy being nurtured by a father who had the knowledge and dedication to provide an extraordinary education. What do you want to do when you grow up, Jasper? Camille asked. Jasper considered the question seriously before answering. I want to build AI systems that can help doctors find cures for diseases like the one that made my mom sick. Dad says that combining computer science with medical research could help a lot of people. The simple, earnest answer revealed the depth of purpose that Rune had instilled in his son, not just academic knowledge, but a sense of responsibility to use that knowledge for meaningful purposes. As Camille stood there in the break room, watching this remarkable father and son, she realized that her entire understanding of success, value, and human potential had been fundamentally challenged. Here was a man who had walked away from everything she had spent her life pursuing, and in doing so, had found something far more meaningful than anything she had achieved in her 42nd floor corner office. For the first time in her adult life, Camille Ashworth found herself questioning whether she had been measuring success by the right criteria. In the days following their conversation, Camille found herself making subtle adjustments to her schedule. She began staying later at the office, telling herself it was to review the quarterly innovation reports or prepare for upcoming investor presentations. But the truth was more complex. She was hoping for another opportunity to speak with Rune Beckett. Her chance came 3 evenings later when she discovered him in conference room 4, helping Jasper with what appeared to be an advanced calculus problem while simultaneously reviewing code on his laptop. This time, when she approached, neither father nor son seemed surprised by her presence. Ms. Ashworth, Rune greeted her with a nod. Working late again? It seems we keep similar hours, Camille replied, gesturing to the materials spread across the table. What are you working on tonight? Jasper's tackling multivariable calculus, Rune explained, and I'm reviewing some open-source machine learning frameworks. There's an interesting new approach to neural network optimization that caught my attention in the latest MIT technology review. Camille's interest was immediately piqued. The distributed training algorithm that reduces computational overhead by 40%. Room looked up sharply, clearly surprised that she was familiar with such current, specialized research. Exactly. Though I think their approach to gradient descent optimization could be refined further. What followed was a 20-minute discussion that would have challenged most of Camille's senior engineers. Room demonstrated an intuitive grasp of advanced machine learning concepts that went far beyond textbook knowledge. He understood the practical implications, the potential applications, and the limitations of emerging technologies in ways that only came from years of hands-on research experience. You disagree with their conclusions about scalability? Camille asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Not disagree, exactly, Roon said thoughtfully. But I think they're approaching the problem from a purely computational efficiency standpoint. What if we considered the human element? AI systems aren't just mathematical abstractions. They're tools that people will interact with, rely on, and be affected by. Sometimes the most elegant algorithmic solution isn't the most ethically responsible one. Camille paused, considering his words. In her world of profit margins and market dominance, she rarely encountered someone who immediately thought about the broader human implications of technological advancement. Can you give me an example? Well, Roon said, warming to the topic, take facial recognition systems. We can build incredibly efficient algorithms that can identify individuals with near-perfect accuracy. But should we? What are the privacy implications? How might such systems be misused by authoritarian governments or corporations? Sometimes the most important question isn't, can we build this? But should we build this? Jasper looked up from his calculus problems. Dad always says that being smart isn't enough, you have to be good too. Camille found herself genuinely moved by the simplicity and wisdom of the young person's observation. Here was a family that had embedded ethical thinking into their approach to technology and learning, treating moral responsibility as inseparable from intellectual achievement. That's a perspective we don't hear enough in corporate environments, Camille admitted. Most of our strategic discussions focus on what's possible and profitable, not necessarily what's responsible. Maybe that's why the tech industry keeps stumbling into ethical scandals, Roon suggested gently. When you optimize only for efficiency and profitability, you inevitably create systems that serve technology rather than humanity. Their conversations became a regular occurrence. Camille began timing her evening departures to coincide with the cleaning crew's arrival, and somehow she always found herself drawn to whatever conference room Roon and Jasper had claimed for their evening study session. What started as curiosity about Roon's background had evolved into something far more meaningful, genuine, intellectual partnership. Roon challenged her thinking in ways that her highly paid consultants and executive team never did. He approached problems from angles she hadn't considered, asked questions that revealed assumptions she didn't realize she was making, and offered perspectives that were both innovative and grounded in real-world ethical considerations. One evening, as they discussed Ashtec's upcoming expansion into healthcare AI, Roon posed a question that stopped Camille in her tracks. What safeguards are you building to ensure that your diagnostic algorithms don't perpetuate existing healthcare disparities? He asked. Camille realized with uncomfortable clarity that her team had spent months optimizing their algorithms for accuracy and speed, but had devoted virtually no attention to ensuring that their systems would serve all populations equitably. Most medical training data comes from clinical studies that historically underrepresented women, minorities, and low-income populations, Roon continued. If your AI system learns from that biased data, it might be incredibly accurate for white, male, affluent patients, but dangerously unreliable for everyone else. How would you address that? Camille asked, genuinely eager to hear his solution. Start with diverse data collection. Partner with community health centers, rural hospitals, international medical organizations. Make sure your training datasets represent the full spectrum of human experience. It might take longer and cost more initially, but you'll build systems that actually serve humanity instead of perpetuating inequality. Camille found herself taking notes, not because she had to, but because Rune's insights were genuinely valuable. She began incorporating his perspectives into her strategic thinking, finding that his combination of technical expertise and ethical grounding helped her see problems and opportunities that had been invisible to her before, but their connection went beyond professional compatibility. Camille began to notice smaller details, the patience with which Rune explained complex concepts to Jasper, the way his eyes lit up when discussing breakthrough research, the quiet pride he took in his son's achievements. She saw how he balanced intellectual rigor with genuine warmth, how he could shift seamlessly from discussing advanced algorithms to helping Jasper with a frustrating geometry proof. "You're an excellent teacher," Camille observed one evening as she watched Rune guide Jasper through a particularly challenging programming exercise. "I had a good example," Rune replied, his expression becoming more tender. "Sarah was an incredible educator. She had this gift for making complex ideas accessible without dumbing them down. Everything I know about teaching, I learned from watching her work with students." Camille found herself wanting to know more about Sarah, about their relationship, about the life that Rune had built and lost and rebuilt. But she also recognized something else. She was beginning to see Rune not as an interesting employee with an unusual background, but as a peer, someone whose intelligence, values, and perspective she genuinely respected and admired. For someone who had spent her entire career surrounded by highly accomplished individuals, this realization was both surprising and unsettling. She had built her identity around being the smartest person in the room, the one with the clearest vision and the strongest strategic thinking. But Rune challenged her intellectually while simultaneously demonstrating a kind of wisdom that her business school education and corporate experience had never taught her. As the weeks passed, Camille found herself looking forward to their evening conversations with an anticipation that had nothing to do with professional networking or strategic planning. For the first time in years, she was engaging with someone who saw her not as a CEO or a business leader, but simply as a person with ideas worth discussing. And for the first time in her adult life, Camille Ashworth was beginning to understand the difference between being successful and being fulfilled. The first whispers began in the executive conference room during a routine board meeting 3 weeks after Camille's regular evening conversations with Rune had become an established pattern. Board member Harold Blackstone, a veteran investor with decades of experience in corporate governance, lingered after the formal meeting had concluded, his expression suggesting he had something delicate to discuss. "Camille, might I have a word?" Harold asked, his tone carefully neutral in the way that seasoned executives used when approaching potentially explosive topics. The remaining board members filed out, leaving Camille alone with Harold and Victoria Crane, Ashtec's chief operating officer and Camille's longest-serving executive team member. Victoria had been instrumental in Ashtec's early growth, and her business acumen was matched only by her fierce protection of the company's reputation. "There's been some concern," Harold began carefully, "about certain patterns that have been observed regarding your schedule and, shall we say, your interactions with building staff." Camille felt a chill of apprehension, though she kept her expression neutral. "I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to, Harold." Victoria leaned forward, her usually warm demeanor replaced by the kind of calculated seriousness she reserved for crisis management situations. "Camille, several people have noticed that you've been staying unusually late, and there have been reports of extended conversations with the night janitor. Building security has mentioned seeing you in conference rooms with custodial staff during non-business hours. I fail to see how my schedule or my conversations with employees should concern anyone. Camille replied, though she could feel the defensive edge creeping into her voice. Harold exchanged a glance with Victoria before continuing. Under normal circumstances, of course. How you spend your time would be entirely your business. But these aren't normal circumstances. You're the CEO of a $15 billion corporation. Every aspect of your behavior reflects on Ashtec's reputation, investor confidence, and market position. What exactly are you suggesting? Camille asked, though she was beginning to understand the direction of their concerns. We're suggesting, Victoria said, her tone becoming more direct, that your apparent friendship with a member of the cleaning staff creates potential complications. Our investors, our clients, our employees, they all look to you as the embodiment of Ashtec's values and professional standards. Harold nodded in agreement. There are already rumors circulating. People are talking about the CEO who spends her evenings in conference rooms with the janitor. That kind of speculation is never beneficial to corporate morale or public perception. Camille felt anger beginning to build in her chest. Are you seriously suggesting that I should avoid speaking with employees simply because of their job classifications? We're suggesting that you consider the optics, Victoria replied. Regardless of your intentions, people draw conclusions. They wonder about your judgment, your priorities, your ability to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. And what conclusions are they drawing, exactly? Camille asked, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Some are questioning whether your judgment might be compromised. Others are speculating about the nature of your relationship with this individual. And still others are wondering whether you've lost touch with the kind of strategic thinking that built Ashtec into the industry leader it is today. The janitor has a name, Camille said quietly. His name is Rune Beckett, and he happens to be one of the most brilliant minds I've ever encountered. He has a PhD from MIT and insights into artificial intelligence that would put most of our senior engineers to shame. Victoria's eyebrows rose skeptically. A PhD from MIT? And he's working as a janitor? Because he chose to prioritize raising his son over pursuing a traditional research career, Camille explained, realizing even as she spoke that her passionate defense was probably confirming their worst suspicions about her emotional investment in Rune's situation. Be that as it may, Harold said, his tone becoming more firm, the perception remains problematic. We've already had 2 major investors ask pointed questions about your recent behavior patterns. The tech media is always looking for scandalous stories about industry leaders, and the narrative of a billionaire CEO having inappropriate relationships with staff members is exactly the kind of story that could damage our reputation irreparably. Inappropriate relationships, Camille repeated, her voice rising. I've been having intellectual conversations with a brilliant man who happens to work in our building. Since when is intellectual discourse considered inappropriate? Appropriate. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying Camille with the analytical gaze she typically reserved for market research. Camille, listen to yourself. You're defending this man with a level of emotional intensity that suggests this is moved beyond mere intellectual appreciation. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Camille had been trying not to examine too closely the fact that her evening conversations with Rune had become the highlight of her days, that she found herself thinking about his perspectives on ethics and technology during business meetings, that she had begun to genuinely care about his opinions and respect his insights in ways that went beyond professional interest. Even if that were true, Camille said carefully, I don't see how my personal feelings should be subject to board oversight. Harold sighed, the sound of someone who had hoped to avoid a more direct confrontation. Camille, your personal feelings become the board's concern when they threaten to impact the company's valuation, reputation, or strategic direction. We've seen brilliant CEOs make career-ending mistakes because they allowed personal relationships to cloud their professional judgment. And we've worked too hard building Ashtec's reputation to watch it be damaged by scandalous speculation." Victoria added, "The shareholders, the employees, the industry analysts, they all depend on your leadership being steady, strategic, and above reproach." Camille looked between the two people who had been her closest professional allies for years, recognizing that this conversation represented a fundamental shift in their relationship. They were no longer speaking to her as trusted advisors. They were speaking to her as board members exercising oversight of a CEO whose behavior they considered problematic. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Camille asked. "We're asking you to consider the bigger picture," Harold replied. "Limit your interactions with this individual to what's professionally necessary. Stop the after-hours meetings, the extended conversations, the apparent personal investment in his situation. And if I refuse?" Victoria's expression became more serious. "Then we'll be forced to consider whether your judgment has become sufficiently compromised to warrant more direct intervention." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. They were questioning her fitness to lead the company she had built from nothing, suggesting that her growing connection to Rune Beckett represented a fundamental failure of professional judgment. As Camille sat in the boardroom where she had made the decisions that built her empire, facing the disapproval of people she had considered allies, she realized that the stakes of her relationship with Rune were far higher than she had initially understood. This wasn't just about personal happiness or intellectual companionship. This was about everything she had worked to achieve, everything she had sacrificed to build. But as she thought about Rune's insights into ethical technology development, his dedication to his son's education, his quiet wisdom about what truly mattered in life, Camille found herself questioning whether the career she was being asked to protect was worth preserving if it meant abandoning the most meaningful connection she had found in years. For the first time in her professional life, Camille Ashworth was being forced to choose between her empire and her heart. The emergency board meeting was called for the following Friday morning, ostensibly to discuss quarterly projections and the upcoming product launch timeline. But Camille knew the real agenda the moment she saw the tight expressions on her board members' faces as they filed into the conference room. Harold Blackstone carried himself with the grim determination of someone preparing for an unpleasant but necessary intervention, while Victoria Crane avoided making direct eye contact, a sure sign that she had been strategizing behind the scenes. "Before we begin with the official agenda," Harold announced once everyone was seated, "we need to address some concerns that have come to the board's attention regarding leadership decisions and their potential impact on corporate reputation." Camille felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that typically accompanied high-stakes business negotiations. But this time the sensation was different, sharper, more personal. She was no longer just defending a strategic decision or a market position. She was about to defend something far more fundamental: her right to form meaningful connections with people, regardless of their social or economic status. "I assume this concerns my interactions with Rune Beckett," Camille said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Board member Susan Walsh, a former Fortune 500 CEO with decades of experience in crisis management, leaned forward. "Camille, we've now had 3 separate investors express concern about reports of your unconventional evening activities. The speculation is becoming problematic." "And what speculation would that be, exactly?" Camille asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Harold cleared his throat. "There are rumors suggesting an inappropriate relationship between you and a member of the custodial staff. Regardless of the truth of those rumors, the mere existence of such speculation threatens to undermine confidence in your leadership." "Furthermore," Victoria added, her voice taking on the crisp tone she used during damage control briefings, "we've learned that you've been using company conference rooms for personal meetings during non-business hours. That raises questions about professional boundaries and the appropriate use of corporate resources. Camille looked around the table at the faces of people she had worked with for years, people who had supported her vision and profited handsomely from her strategic decisions. She realized with crystalline clarity that they saw Rune not as an individual with remarkable intelligence and character, but as a threat to their comfortable understanding of social hierarchies. "Let me make sure I understand your concerns," Camille said, her voice gaining strength as her resolve crystallized. "You're suggesting that I should cease all personal interactions with Rune Beckett because his job title doesn't meet your standards for appropriate social connections." "We're suggesting that you consider the broader implications of your choices," Harold replied. "AAO's personal relationships inevitably become public relationships, and public relationships affect stock prices, investor confidence, and market perception." Camille stood up slowly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline. For a moment, she looked out at the city where she had built her empire, where thousands of people worked in jobs that society deemed more or less valuable based on arbitrary classifications of prestige and compensation. "Do you know what Rune Beckett was doing before he became our night janitor?" she asked, turning back to face the board. "That's not really relevant to," Susan began. "He was a postdoctoral researcher at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory," Camille continued, her voice cutting through the attempted interruption. "He has published papers on machine learning algorithms that are now fundamental to AI development worldwide. He gave up a prestigious research career to be present for his son after his wife died of early-onset dementia." She could see the surprise on several faces around the table, but also a stubborn resistance to the implications of this information. "He chose love over prestige," Camille continued. "He chose being present for his family over maximizing his earning potential. He chose human connection over career advancement. And you want me to avoid him because those choices resulted in a job title that embarrasses you." Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Camille, his background doesn't change the fact that your behavior is generating negative speculation." "Then, perhaps," Camille said, her voice rising with conviction, "the problem isn't my behavior. Perhaps the problem is a society so obsessed with social status that it can't recognize brilliance and character when they don't come packaged in expensive suits and corner offices." Harold's expression hardened. "Camille, you're being naive. Public perception matters in business. Investor confidence matters. Market positioning matters. You can't run a $15 billion corporation based on idealistic principles about social equality. Can't I?" Camille challenged, moving back to the table and placing her hands flat on its surface, leaning forward to meet each board member's gaze directly. "Because the last time I checked, I built this company from nothing based on the radical idea that artificial intelligence should serve humanity rather than exploit it. I built Ashtec on principles that many people called naive and idealistic." She straightened, her voice becoming more powerful as her conviction grew. "Rune Beckett has insights into ethical technology development that have already influenced 3 major strategic decisions I've made this quarter. His perspective on AI bias prevention led to algorithm improvements that will make our healthcare systems more equitable. His thoughts on privacy protection shaped our new data security protocols." "Be that as it may," Harold said, his tone becoming more authoritative, "the board has serious concerns about your judgment. We're asking you to end these personal interactions and refocus on your professional responsibilities." Camille felt something shift inside her, a clarity that she hadn't experienced since the early days of building Ashtec, when every decision had been guided by conviction rather than convention. "No," she said simply. The single word hung in the air like a challenge thrown down at the feet of corporate authority. "Excuse me?" Victoria asked. "No," Camille repeated, her voice growing stronger. I will not end my friendship with Rune Beckett. I will not pretend that his worth as a human being is determined by his job title. And I will not allow this board to dictate my personal relationships based on their prejudices about social class. Susan's face flushed with anger. Camille, you're jeopardizing everything you've built. I'm protecting everything I've built. Camille interrupted. I built Ashtec to prove that technology companies could operate with ethical principles and human values. If I abandon those principles the moment they become personally inconvenient, then everything I've built becomes meaningless. She looked around the table again, her gaze steady and unwavering. Rune Beckett is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. He's brilliant, ethical, dedicated, and kind. If associating with him threatens your confidence in my leadership, then perhaps you need to reconsider what kind of leadership you're actually looking for. Harold leaned back in his chair, his expression suggesting that the conversation had moved beyond his expectations into territory that would require more serious intervention. Camille, he said carefully, we hope you'll reconsider this position. The board has options if we determine that your judgment has become fundamentally compromised. The threat was no longer subtle. They were prepared to remove her from the company she had built if she refused to conform to their expectations about appropriate social behavior. Camille felt a moment of vertigo as she contemplated the possibility of losing everything she had worked to achieve. But then she thought about Rune, patiently teaching advanced algorithms to his son in an empty conference room, about his insights into building technology that served humanity rather than exploiting it, about the quiet dignity with which he had sacrificed personal ambition for parental love. Then I guess we'll find out, she said, whether my shareholders value ethical leadership or social conformity more highly. With that declaration, Camille walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind the stunned silence of people who had never imagined that their CEO would choose personal principles over professional preservation. For the first time in her career, Camille Ashworth had chosen love over power, and she felt more powerful than she ever had in any boardroom. The fallout from Camille's boardroom declaration began within hours. By Monday morning, what should have been a routine week of product development meetings and investor calls had transformed into a corporate crisis that threatened to unravel everything she had spent years building. Victoria Crane appeared in Camille's office at 7:30 a.m., her usually composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. She carried a tablet loaded with news alerts, social media posts, and internal company communications that painted a picture of an organization under siege. It started, Victoria said without preamble, setting the tablet on Camille's desk. Someone leaked the details of Friday's board meeting to TechCrunch. The story went live an hour ago. Camille scanned the headline, Ashtec CEO Camille Ashworth, under fire for inappropriate relationship with custodial staff member. The article, written with the breathless sensationalism that characterized modern tech journalism, painted her defiance of the board as evidence of compromised judgment and possible romantic entanglement with an employee. They're framing it as a scandal, Victoria continued, her voice tight with frustration. The narrative is that you've lost touch with professional boundaries and that the board is concerned about your fitness to lead. But the media attention was only the beginning. By 10 a.m., Camille was fielding calls from major investors demanding explanations. The stock price had dropped 3% in pre-market trading as speculation spread about potential leadership instability at Ashtec. Harold Blackstone had scheduled an emergency investor conference call for that afternoon, ostensibly to clarify recent misunderstandings about company leadership. The internal pressure was equally intense. Senior employees approached Victoria and other executive team members with concerns about their CEO's behavior, worried about their own career prospects. If the company's reputation suffered, several department heads requested private meetings to discuss the situation. clearly uncomfortable with the idea that their CEO was personally involved with someone they considered a member of the support staff. But the most devastating blow came at noon, when Teresa Dixon knocked on Camille's office door with an expression that suggested she was bearing particularly bad news. "Ms. Ashworth, there's been a development," Teresa said carefully. "Building security reported that Mr. Beckett submitted his resignation this morning. He's not scheduled to work tonight." Camille felt the blood drain from her face. His resignation? Did he say why? According to the building management company, he cited personal reasons and requested that his final day be today. He's apparently packing up his things now. The realization hit Camille like a physical blow. Rune was leaving because of her. The media attention, the corporate pressure, the obvious disruption to his quiet life. He was removing himself from the situation to protect both of them from further scrutiny. Camille grabbed her jacket and headed for the elevator, ignoring Teresa's protests about her scheduled afternoon meetings. She found Rune in the custodial supply room on the building's lower level, methodically packing his personal belongings into a cardboard box. He looked up when she entered, his expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. "You don't have to say anything," Rune said before she could speak. "I understand why this had to happen." "No, you don't understand," Camille replied, her voice more intense than she had intended. "I don't want you to leave. I meant every word I said to the board on Friday." Rune paused in his packing, studying her face with the same careful attention he gave to complex algorithms. "Camille, look at what's happening. Your company is in crisis. Your board is questioning your leadership. Your career is being threatened. All because you defended your friendship with me. All because they can't see past outdated social prejudices," Camille corrected. "All because they value appearance over substance, status over character." "Maybe," Rune said quietly. "But the practical reality is that my presence in your life is causing you to lose everything you've worked to build. I can't be responsible for that." Camille moved closer, her frustration evident. "You're not responsible for anything. I made a choice to value authentic human connection over corporate politics. I'm not backing down from that choice." "But you should," Rune said, his voice heavy with conviction. "Camille, you've built something extraordinary with Ashtec. You're developing technologies that will improve millions of lives. You're proving that tech companies can operate with ethical principles. That's more important than whatever friendship we've developed, is it?" Camille challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, the most important thing I've learned in months is that all the technological innovation in the world doesn't matter if you lose sight of what makes us human." Rune's expression softened, but his resolve remained firm. "And what I've learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step away. You have responsibilities to your employees, to your shareholders, to the industry you're trying to change. I won't be the reason you can't fulfill those responsibilities." The conversation was interrupted by Camille's phone buzzing with an urgent call from Victoria. The investor conference call had been moved up, and Camille's presence was immediately required to address growing concerns about company stability. "I have to take this," Camille said reluctantly. The next 2 hours were among the most challenging of Camille's professional life. On the conference call, she faced pointed questions from investors who had heard the media reports and were concerned about potential leadership instability. Harold Blackstone, speaking with the authority of someone who had clearly prepared for this moment, suggested that the board was evaluating all options to ensure continued stable leadership at Ashtec. The subtext was unmistakable. If Camille didn't distance herself from Rune and refocus on conventional corporate leadership, the board was prepared to remove her from her position. "Ms. Ashworth," asked Jonathan Pierce, representing one of Ashtec's largest institutional investors, "can you assure us that recent distractions won't continue to impact your strategic focus or decision-making capacity?" Camille felt the weight of hundreds of millions of dollars in investment capital hanging on her response. She thought about her employees, many of whom had joined Ashtec because they believed in her vision of ethical technology development. She thought about the breakthrough medical AI systems that were still in development, technologies that could revolutionize healthcare if given time to mature. And she thought about Rune, probably finishing his packing at that very moment, preparing to disappear from her life in order to protect her from the consequences of choosing him over social convention. "I can assure you," Camille said carefully, "that my commitment to Ashtec's mission and my dedication to maximizing shareholder value remain absolute. Absolute." It was a politically safe answer that satisfied no one while avoiding direct confrontation. But as soon as the call ended, Camille realized that her careful neutrality felt like a betrayal of everything she had declared to the board just days earlier. The crisis deepened when later that afternoon, a second news story broke, this one more invasive and personal. A technology blogger had somehow obtained information about Rune's educational background and family situation, spinning a narrative about the mate-educated janitor who captured a billionaire's heart. The article included details about Sarah's death, Jasper's academic achievements, and Rune's sacrifice of his research career for single parenthood. The story, while factually accurate, transformed their situation into a public spectacle. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and commentary about class differences, corporate power, and romantic relationships that crossed social boundaries. #JanitorRomance began trending on Twitter, with people taking sides about whether Camille's actions represented admirable principle or poor judgment, but the most painful aspect of the media coverage was how it affected Jasper. Rune called Camille that evening to inform her that reporters had appeared at Jasper's school, asking questions about his father's relationship with the Ashtec CEO. The young boy, who had simply been proud of his father's intelligence and work ethic, suddenly found himself at the center of a media storm he couldn't understand. "He asked me tonight why people are saying mean things about you on the internet," Rune told Camille, his voice strained with the exhaustion of someone trying to protect his son from adult complications. "He doesn't understand why anyone would think badly of you for being nice to us." Camille felt her heart break at the image of Jasper, brilliant and innocent, confused by the ugly realities of class prejudice and corporate politics. This wasn't what she had wanted when she chose to defend their friendship. She had never intended for her personal principles to result in a young person being subjected to media scrutiny. "Rune, I'm so sorry," she said. "I never wanted any of this to affect Jasper." "I know you didn't," Rune replied gently. "But it has affected him, and it's affecting you. Your company is in crisis, your career is being threatened, and all because you chose to see value in people that society overlooks." There was a long pause before Rune continued, his voice heavy with finality. "I've already found another job, Camille. Night security at a medical research facility across town. Jasper and I are going to be fine. But you need to focus on saving what you've built with Ashtec. Too many people depend on your leadership for you to sacrifice it for our friendship." As Camille ended the call, sitting alone in her office while Seattle's city lights twinkled below, she faced the most difficult decision of her life. She could continue fighting for her right to choose her own relationships, potentially losing her company and the ability to implement the ethical technology initiatives she believed could change the world. Or she could step back, accept the board's demands, and preserve her empire while losing the most meaningful personal connection she had found in years. For the first time since building Ashtec, Camille Ashworth felt truly powerless, caught between her principles and her responsibilities, between her heart and her empire, between love and everything she had previously believed defined success. The crisis had reached its peak, and the path forward had never been less clear. Camille spent the next 3 days in a state of emotional paralysis, mechanically attending meetings and making decisions while feeling increasingly disconnected from the empire she had built. The media storm continued to rage, with new articles appearing daily that dissected every aspect of her relationship with Rune. Stock analysts questioned Ashtec's leadership stability. Competitors circled like vultures sensing weakness, and her own executive team walked on eggshells around her, uncertain whether their CEO was experiencing a temporary crisis of judgment or a fundamental transformation of values. But it was Thursday evening. As Camille sat alone in her penthouse apartment, staring at the city lights she had once viewed as a symbol of her conquest, that the breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. Her doorbell rang at nearly 10 p.m., an unusual occurrence given the building's strict security protocols. When she answered, she found Jasper Beckett standing in her hallway, looking small and determined in his school clothes, a worn backpack slung over his shoulder. "Jasper?" Camille said, alarmed. "How did you get here? Where's your father?" "He's at his new job," Jasper replied matter-of-factly. "I took the bus. I Googled your address. It's public information because you're famous." Camille quickly ushered him inside, her mind racing with concerns about a 9-year-old traveling alone across the city at night. "Jasper, you can't just... Does your father know where you are?" "I left him a note," Jasper said, setting down his backpack and looking around the penthouse with curious eyes. "I told him I needed to talk to you about something important." "This is dangerous," Camille said, reaching for her phone. "I need to call him right away." "Please," Jasper interrupted, his voice carrying a maturity that reminded Camille powerfully of his father. "Just let me say what I came to say first. Then you can call Dad." Something in the young boy's earnest expression made Camille pause. She set down her phone and knelt to his eye level. "All right, Jasper, what did you want to tell me?" Jasper took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts with the same careful precision she had observed when he worked through complex mathematical problems. "I've been reading the news articles about you and my dad. I know people are saying mean things and that Dad left his job because of it." Camille felt her heart clench at the matter-of-fact way Jasper discussed the situation that had torn her world apart. "I'm sorry you've had to deal with any of this, Jasper. None of this should have affected you." "But it did affect me," Jasper said simply. "And I think that's okay, because important things are supposed to affect people. Dad taught me that." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a tablet, opening it to reveal a document he had clearly spent considerable time preparing. "I made a presentation, like the ones Dad taught me to make for my advanced coursework. I wanted to show you something." Camille found herself genuinely curious as Jasper navigated to his first slide, which was titled, "Why My Dad is the Best Person." "I know." What followed was a 9-year-old's perspective on his father's character, but presented with the analytical rigor of someone who had been raised to think critically about evidence and conclusions. "See, everyone is talking about Dad like he's just a janitor," Jasper explained, advancing through slides that documented Rune's daily routine, his educational activities with Jasper, his volunteer work at the local community center teaching computer literacy to seniors. "But that's like saying you're just a person who sits in meetings all day." "It's technically true, but it misses everything important." Camille watched, transfixed, as Jasper methodically presented his case. He had screenshots of Rune's published research papers, testimonials he had somehow obtained from former colleagues at MIT, and detailed documentation of the advanced curriculum Rune had designed for his homeschooling. Dad could have stayed at MIT, Jasper continued, his voice becoming more passionate. His advisor wanted him to continue his research. There were companies that wanted to hire him, but he chose to be with me instead because he said that raising me was the most important work he could do. The slide changed to reveal a simple chart comparing traditional measures of success: salary, job title, social status, with what Jasper called actual important things: kindness, intelligence, dedication to family, contribution to others. Well-being. People think Dad failed because he doesn't have a fancy job title, Jasper said, his young voice carrying conviction that would have impressed any boardroom. But he succeeded at the thing that matters most. He's teaching me to be a good person who uses intelligence to help others. Isn't that more important than making lots of money? Camille felt tears beginning to well in her eyes, not just because of Jasper's profound insight, but because she recognized the values that Rune had instilled in his son, values that had been missing from her own relentless pursuit of corporate success. And you, Jasper continued, advancing to his final slide, you saw that Dad was special even when everyone else just saw a janitor. That means you're special too. The last slide was simple, containing only a few words. Smart people recognize other smart people, even when they're wearing different uniforms. Camille stared at the screen, feeling something fundamental shift inside her chest. Here was a 9-year-old who had articulated with crystal clarity what she had been struggling to understand for days, that the crisis she was facing wasn't really about corporate politics or media speculation or boardroom power struggles. It was about whether she had the courage to live according to the values she claimed to believe in. Jasper, she said softly, you said you read the news articles. You know that people are criticizing me for being friends with your father. Doesn't that make you angry? Jasper considered the question seriously. I was angry at first, he admitted. But then Dad explained that some people have trouble seeing past the outside of things to what's really important inside. He said that's why he admires you, because you can see what's really important. Your father said that? He said you're the first person in a long time who looked at him and saw a person instead of just a job title. He said that made you different from most powerful people. Camille felt the last of her emotional defenses crumble. She had been so focused on the external pressures, the board's disapproval, the media attention, the investor concerns, that she had lost sight of the fundamental truth that had drawn her to Rune in the first place. He represented everything she had claimed to value: intelligence, integrity, dedication to human welfare, the courage to prioritize what truly mattered over what society rewarded. Jasper, she said, reaching out to take his small hands in hers, what if defending my friendship with your father costs me my company? What if I lose everything I've built? Jasper looked at her with eyes that held wisdom far beyond his years. Dad lost his research career to take care of me, and he says it was the best trade he ever made. Maybe losing the wrong things is how you make room for the right things. In that moment, sitting in her expensive penthouse apartment, listening to a 9-year-old explain the difference between success and fulfillment, Camille experienced a clarity that had eluded her throughout her entire corporate career. She had built Ashtec to prove that technology companies could operate with ethical principles, but she had been preparing to abandon those very principles the moment they became personally costly. She thought about all the time she had told her employees that Ashtec stood for innovation that served humanity, for treating people with dignity regardless of their position, for valuing character over credentials. How could she claim to lead a company based on those values while simultaneously allowing her board to pressure her into abandoning someone who embodied everything she claimed to believe in? You're right, Camille said, feeling a surge of determination that reminded her of the early days of building Ashtec, when every decision had been guided by conviction rather than convention. Your father is special, and anyone who can't see that is missing something important about what makes people valuable. Jasper smiled, the first genuinely happy expression she had seen from him since this crisis began. So what are you going to do? Camille stood up, her mind already racing with possibilities. I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning. I'm going to fight for what's right, regardless of the cost. She reached for her phone, but this time not to call Rune with apologies or explanations. This time, she was calling to tell him that she had remembered who she was and what she stood for, and that she was done apologizing for seeing his true worth. But first, she said to Jasper, I need to call your father and let him know you're safe. And then I need to ask both of you to help me with something." "What?" "I need help designing a presentation of my own," Camille said, her voice gaining strength as her plan crystallized. "Something that will remind my board, my investors, and anyone else who's forgotten that Ashtec was built on the radical idea that human value isn't determined by social status or job titles." As she dialed Rune's number, Camille felt more alive than she had in years. The crisis had forced her to confront the difference between the leader she claimed to be and the leader she actually was. Now, thanks to the wisdom of a 9-year-old boy who understood what truly mattered, she was ready to become the person she had always said she wanted to be. The fight for her principles was about to begin in earnest, and for the first time since this crisis started, Camille Ashworth felt like she was going to win. The emergency shareholders meeting was scheduled for the following Monday, ostensibly to address leadership concerns and strategic direction. Harold Blackstone had clearly orchestrated this gathering as the final move in his campaign to force Camille's resignation or significantly curtail her authority. The conference room on Ashtec's 42nd floor buzzed with tension as board members, major investors, and key institutional shareholders filed in, their expressions ranging from concern to openly hostile. But Camille had spent the weekend preparing for this confrontation with an intensity that reminded her of the early days of building Ashtec, when every presentation could mean the difference between securing funding and watching her dreams collapse. This time, however, she wasn't fighting for her company's survival. She was fighting for something far more fundamental, the right to lead according to her principles rather than other people's prejudices. "Before we begin," Camille announced, as the meeting was called to order, "I have a presentation I'd like to share that directly addresses the concerns that have been raised about my judgment and leadership." Harold's expression suggested he had expected her to offer apologies and compromises, not to go on the offensive. "Camille, we appreciate your willingness to address these issues. But, with respect, Harold," Camille interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built the company they were all profiting from, "I believe the concerns that have been raised reveal more about our industry's limitations than they do about my leadership capabilities." She activated the room's presentation system, and her first slide appeared, recognizing excellence, why Ashtec's core values matter more than social conventions. "Over the past week," Camille began, "there has been significant discussion about my interactions with Rune Beckett, characterized by some as inappropriate fraternization with custodial staff. I want to share with you who Rune Beckett actually is, and why my recognition of his exceptional capabilities represents exactly the kind of leadership Ashtec needs." Her next slide displayed Rune's academic credentials: MIT PhD in computer science, magna cum laude undergraduate degree from Carnegie Mellon, published research in artificial intelligence that had been cited over 2,000 times in academic literature. A murmur rippled through the room. Several board members exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the extent of Rune's qualifications. "Dr. Beckett," Camille continued, "was a postdoctoral researcher at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory before making the personal choice to prioritize single parenthood over career advancement, following his wife's death from early-onset dementia." She advanced to the next slide, which showed a timeline of Rune's research publications, alongside major breakthrough developments in machine learning algorithms. His 2019 paper on bias reduction in neural networks anticipated problems that are only now being widely recognized by the tech industry. His work on ethical AI development frameworks predated similar initiatives by Google, Microsoft, and Facebook by 18 months. Jonathan Pierce, the institutional investor who had questioned her judgment during the previous week's conference call, leaned forward in his chair. "Are you saying this individual has been working as a janitor despite these credentials?" "I'm saying," Camille replied, That this individual chose to prioritize being present for his son's development over maximizing his earning potential. And I'm saying that a company founded on the principle that technology should serve humanity rather than exploit it should recognize and value such choices. Her next slide showed a comparison of Rune's insights versus recommendations from Ashtech's highly paid consulting firms on 3 recent strategic decisions. Over the past month, Dr. Beckett's informal advice has influenced 3 major strategic directions for Ashtech. His perspective on healthcare AI bias prevention led to algorithm improvements that will make our systems 40% more accurate for underrepresented populations. His recommendations for privacy protection protocols exceed industry standards and position us ahead of anticipated regulatory requirements. She clicked to reveal financial projections. These improvements, suggested by someone we employ as a night janitor, are projected to increase market valuation by $2.3 billion over the next 3 years. The room had grown noticeably quieter. Board members who had arrived prepared to discuss Camille's removal were now confronting evidence that her inappropriate relationship had actually generated substantial value for the company. Furthermore, Camille continued, advancing to a slide showing social media analytics and news coverage patterns. The narrative surrounding our situation has created an unexpected public relations opportunity. #Janitor Romance has generated over 50 million social media impressions, with 87% positive sentiment once people learn Dr. Beckett's background. Ashtech is being positioned as a company that values substance over superficial social markers. Victoria Crane, who had been one of Camille's harshest critics, spoke up reluctantly. The stock price has actually recovered over the past 3 days as more information about Mr. Beckett's background has emerged. Because, Camille said, the public recognizes authentic values when they see them. People are inspired by stories of genuine human connection, intellectual recognition that transcends social boundaries, and leadership that prioritizes character over conventional expectations. She paused, looking around the room at faces that had shifted from hostile to thoughtful. But this presentation isn't really about Dr. Beckett's credentials, impressive as they are. It's about what kind of company we want Ashtech to be. Her next slide displayed Ashtech's founding mission statement: to develop artificial intelligence that serves humanity by recognizing and nurturing human potential wherever it exists. When I founded Ashtech, Camille continued, her voice gaining emotional resonance, I believed that our industry's greatest weakness was its tendency to overlook talent that didn't come packaged in predictable forms. We've built algorithms that can recognize patterns invisible to human perception, but we can't recognize brilliance when it's wearing a custodial uniform. She advanced to a slide showing statistics about underutilized talent in the workforce, PhD holders driving rideshare vehicles, former executives working retail, brilliant minds trapped in jobs that didn't reflect their capabilities due to economic necessity, family obligations, or social barriers. Dr. Beckett represents millions of people whose potential is invisible to traditional hiring practices and social assumptions. If Ashtech can't recognize and value such individuals, how can we claim to be developing AI systems that truly understand human capability? The room was silent now, the weight of her argument settling over board members and investors who had spent the past week assuming they were dealing with a CEO whose judgment had been compromised by personal feelings. Harold Blackstone cleared his throat. Camille, these are certainly compelling points about Mr. Beckett's qualifications, but the concern remains about professional boundaries, and the concern, Camille interrupted, should be about our industry's inability to recognize talent. That doesn't conform to narrow social expectations. The concern should be about building technology companies that embody the innovative thinking they claim to represent. She clicked to her final slide, which showed a proposal titled, The Ashtech Talent Recognition Initiative. I'm proposing that we formalize what my interaction with Dr. Beckett has demonstrated. A company-wide commitment to identifying and developing exceptional talent, regardless of current employment status, educational pedigree, or social background. We'll partner with community organizations, create alternative pathway programs, and actively seek brilliance in unexpected places. The proposal outlines specific programs, coding boot camps for career changers, research fellowships for underemployed PhD holders, mentorship initiatives that paired AshTech executives with individuals whose potential had been overlooked by traditional systems. Dr. Beckett will lead this initiative, Camille announced, as AshTech's new Director of Inclusive Innovation. His combination of technical expertise, ethical grounding, and understanding of systemic barriers makes him uniquely qualified to help us identify and develop the next generation of technological leaders. The announcement created an immediate stir. Board members who had arrived expecting to discuss Camille's resignation were now confronting a strategic initiative that transformed her supposed scandal into a competitive advantage. Susan Walsh raised her hand. What you're describing is essentially a talent acquisition strategy disguised as social responsibility. If this Dr. Beckett is as exceptional as you claim, promoting him to an executive position makes business sense regardless of personal relationships. Exactly, Camille said, feeling a surge of triumph as she watched the room's understanding shift. This was never about inappropriate relationships or compromised judgment. This was about recognizing exceptional talent and building a company culture that values substance over superficial social markers. She looked directly at Harold Blackstone. The question isn't whether my judgment has been compromised by personal feelings. The question is whether this board has the vision to support a leadership approach that prioritizes actual value creation over conventional social expectations. As murmurs of discussion broke out around the room, Camille realized that the tide had fundamentally shifted. What had begun as a crisis threatening her leadership had become a demonstration of exactly the kind of innovative thinking that had built AshTech into an industry leader. Jonathan Pierce spoke up again, his tone now considerably more respectful. Ms. Ashworth, assuming this initiative proves successful, what's the projected timeline for implementation? Camille smiled, recognizing the shift from hostility to genuine business interest. Dr. Beckett and I have already begun preliminary planning. We anticipate launching the first programs within 60 days. As the formal meeting concluded and board members began discussing implementation details rather than leadership concerns, Camille felt a profound sense of vindication. She had not only defended her principles, but had demonstrated that those principles could create genuine business value. But more importantly, she had proven to herself and to everyone in that room that recognizing human worth, regardless of job titles or social expectations, wasn't just morally right. It was strategically brilliant. The fight for her values had become a victory that would transform not just her company, but her industry's approach to identifying and developing talent. And at the center of it all was a man whose brilliance had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the courage to look beyond the surface and see what truly mattered. 3 months later, the AshTech Talent Recognition Initiative had become the tech industry's most talked about human resources innovation. The program's first cohort included a former NASA engineer driving for a delivery service, a brilliant data scientist who had left her corporate job to care for elderly parents, and a software architect who had been underemployed due to a criminal record from his youth. Early results exceeded all projections, with the initiative's participants generating breakthrough solutions to problems that had stymied AshTech's traditional development teams. Roon's transition from night janitor to director of inclusive innovation had been seamless, his combination of technical expertise and ethical grounding proving invaluable as he designed programs that identified talent in unexpected places. His office on the 39th floor, just 3 floors below Camille's executive suite, had become a hub of innovation where former custodians worked, alongside PhD researchers on projects that were revolutionizing how the tech industry thought about human potential. But the professional success, remarkable as it was, paled in comparison to the personal transformation that had unfolded alongside. # strategic evolution. The evening of the program's 3-month milestone celebration, Camille stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room where she had first discovered Rune teaching algorithms to Jasper. The space had been transformed for the celebration, filled with employees, board members, community partners, and media representatives who had come to recognize what was being called the most innovative talent development program in corporate America. Ms. Ashworth? Jasper's voice interrupted her contemplation. She turned to find him approaching, wearing a suit that made him look remarkably mature for his 10 years, carrying himself with the quiet confidence that had always characterized both father and son. Jasper, Camille smiled, kneeling to his eye level. You look very handsome tonight. Are you enjoying the celebration? It's pretty cool, Jasper admitted. Dad keeps getting asked to give interviews, and everyone wants to know about the algorithms he developed for identifying underutilized talent. But I wanted to ask you something, of course. What's on your mind? Jasper glanced around the room, his expression becoming more serious. Dad's been different lately, happier, I think. And he talks about you a lot, not just about work stuff, but about how smart you are and how you make him laugh. Camille felt her heart skip, unsure where this conversation was heading. Your father is a remarkable man, Jasper. I enjoy spending time with both of you. I know, Jasper said simply. And I was wondering, do you love him? The direct question, delivered with characteristic straightforwardness, caught Camille completely off guard. She looked into Jasper's intelligent eyes and realized that this young person, who had already demonstrated wisdom beyond his years, deserved an honest answer. Yes, she said softly. I do love him. Jasper nodded as if this confirmed what he had already suspected. He loves you too. I can tell because he's been reading poetry again. He always did that when he was thinking about Mom. And he's been asking me hypothetical questions about how I'd feel about changes to our family. Camille's breath caught. Changes? Like if he wanted to marry someone, Jasper said matter-of-factly. And I told him that if it was someone who understood that intelligence comes in lots of different packages, and who wasn't afraid to fight for what's right, then I thought that would be pretty great. Before Camille could respond, Rune appeared beside them, his expression suggesting he had overheard at least part of their conversation. Jasper, he said gently, what are you up to? Just having an important conversation with Camille, Jasper replied innocently. I think you two should talk too. With that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Camille and Rune standing together beside the windows that looked out over Seattle's glittering skyline. He's quite the strategist, Rune observed, his eyes following his son's path through the celebration. He gets that from his father, Camille replied, still processing the implications of their conversation. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the party that celebrated not just professional success, but a fundamental shift in how their industry thought about human value and potential. Camille, Rune said eventually, his voice taking on the serious tone she had learned to associate with his most important observations. 3 months ago, you risked everything you had built to defend something you believed in. You didn't just change my life, you changed how I think about what's possible when someone has the courage to see beyond surfaces. You changed my understanding of what success actually means, Camille replied. I thought I was successful because I had built a profitable company. But success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you create that makes the world better. Rune moved closer, his eyes searching her face with the same careful attention he brought to complex problems. I've been thinking about what Jasper said to you that night in your apartment, about making room for the right things by letting go of the wrong things. What have you been thinking? I've been thinking that I spent 2 years believing that. My greatest success was sacrificing my career for Jasper's well-being. But maybe my greatest success was meeting someone who could see that choice as strength rather than failure. Camille felt her heart racing as she recognized the direction of their conversation. And I've been thinking, Rune continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, that the most important algorithm I could ever develop would be one for building a life that maximizes not just individual potential, but shared happiness. He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring that was elegant in its simplicity, a design that reflected both technological precision and emotional warmth. Camille Ashworth, Rune said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. You saw value in someone that everyone else overlooked. You fought for principles when it would have been easier to compromise. You've shown me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your existing life. It's about building a new life together that's better than anything either person could create alone. The celebration continued around them, but Camille felt as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them and the question that hung in the air between them. Will you marry me? Rune asked. Camille looked at this man who had challenged her thinking, supported her principles, and shown her that the most important innovations weren't technological but human. She thought about Jasper's wisdom, about the life they could build together, about the possibility of combining their different strengths into something unprecedented and beautiful. Yes, she said, her voice filled with the certainty that had driven every major decision in her life. Yes, I will marry you. As Rune slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed, surrounded by the celebration of everything they had built together, Camille realized that this moment represented more than just personal happiness. It was proof that when people had the courage to value substance over superficial social markers, when they chose principles over convenience, when they recognized that the best innovations came from seeing potential in unexpected places, extraordinary things became possible. Harold Blackstone, who had become one of the initiative's strongest supporters, approached them with champagne glasses and a knowing smile. Congratulations, he said warmly. I believe this calls for a toast. As the celebration continued around them, Camille and Rune stood together, their future stretching ahead of them, filled with possibilities that neither could have imagined when they first met in a conference room where a janitor was teaching algorithms to his brilliant son. They had found each other by looking beyond surfaces to recognize what truly mattered. And in doing so, they had discovered that the greatest success wasn't building an empire. It was building a life worth living. 5 years had transformed both the Seattle skyline and the lives of everyone touched by the extraordinary love story that had begun. In Conference Room 7 of Nexus Tower, the Ashtec campus had expanded to include the Beckett Center for Inclusive Innovation, a gleaming research facility dedicated to identifying and developing talent, regardless of traditional credentialing or social background. The center's success had inspired similar programs across the tech industry, fundamentally altering how Silicon Valley approached human resource development. But the most profound changes were visible in the penthouse that Camille and Rune now called home, where the sterile perfection of corporate success had been replaced by the warm chaos of a life built around love, learning, and shared purpose. On this particular Saturday morning, 15-year-old Jasper sat at the kitchen island, simultaneously working through advanced calculus problems and debugging code for his latest AI project, a machine learning system designed to identify learning disabilities in elementary students before they became academic obstacles. His intelligence had continued to flourish under the combined guidance of both parents, but more importantly, he had developed the kind of ethical grounding that made his brilliance a force for positive change. Dad, can you check my algorithm for bias detection? Jasper asked, looking up from his laptop. I want to make sure it doesn't accidentally perpetuate the same educational inequalities it's designed to identify. Rune looked up from where he was preparing breakfast, his expression reflecting the pride of a father whose son had learned to think not just about what was possible, but about what was responsible, of course. But remember what we discussed. About intersectionality, you'll want to test across multiple demographic categories simultaneously. Camille watched this exchange while reviewing the morning's news. Coverage of Hashtag's latest breakthrough, an AI-powered job matching system that had successfully placed over 50,000 underemployed workers in positions that matched their actual capabilities rather than their formal credentials. The system, based on algorithms that Rune had developed, had reduced unemployment in economically disadvantaged communities by 37% across 12 major cities. The Times wants to do a follow-up story on the Talent Recognition Initiative, Camille announced, setting down her tablet. They're calling it the program that revolutionized Silicon Valley's approach to human potential. Are you going to mention that it all started because I had a crush on the night janitor? Rune asked with a grin, sliding a plate of perfectly prepared eggs Benedict in front of her. I prefer to say it started because I was smart enough to recognize brilliance when I saw it, Camille replied, reaching over to squeeze his hand, even when it came wearing a custodial uniform. Their love story had become something of a legend in corporate circles, not just because of its unconventional beginnings, but because of the lasting impact it had created. Business schools now taught case studies about the Ashworth-Beckett model of talent identification. TED Talks analyzing their approach to values-based leadership had been viewed millions of times, and their marriage had inspired countless other executives to reconsider their assumptions about worth, success, and the courage required to follow your heart over social expectations. But beyond the public recognition, their relationship had continued to deepen in ways that surprised them both. Rune's ethical grounding had influenced every major strategic decision Camille made, while her business acumen had helped him scale his innovative programs from local experiments to industry-wide transformations. They challenged each other intellectually, supported each other emotionally, and had built a partnership that made both of them better leaders and better people. I got accepted, Jasper announced quietly, looking up from his computer with an expression that mixed excitement with nervousness. Both parents turned to him with immediate attention. For months, Jasper had been working on applications to early admission programs at several universities. Though at 15, he was young even for accelerated academic programs. The MIT-Harvard Joint Program in AI Ethics, Jasper continued. They want me to start this fall. Camille felt her heart swell with pride and concern in equal measure. Jasper, that's incredible. But are you sure you're ready to leave home? Actually, Jasper said, his tone becoming more confident, I was hoping you'd consider making it a family project. The program is specifically interested in students who have real-world experience with ethical technology implementation. They want to know if you'd both be willing to serve as practitioner advisors. Rune and Camille exchanged glances, recognizing their son's sophisticated understanding of how to turn personal opportunity into family collaboration. So instead of going away to college, Rune said slowly, you're proposing that we all relocate to Massachusetts so you can study while we consult on ethical AI development? Basically, yes, Jasper said with a smile that revealed how carefully he had thought through this proposal. Plus, MIT wants to establish a West Coast satellite campus for the program, and they've asked if Hashtag would consider partnering on the facility. Over the following hour, as they discussed the possibilities and implications of this new opportunity, Camille reflected on how much their lives had changed since that evening when she first discovered Rune teaching algorithms in a conference. Rune, the scared, brilliant young boy, had grown into a confident young man who understood that the best opportunities were those that elevated everyone involved. The isolated CEO had learned that true success meant building something meaningful with people you loved. And the sacrificial single father had discovered that choosing love over conventional ambition had led to greater impact than any traditional career path could have provided. Later that evening, as they walked through the Seattle Center where they had held their wedding 5 years earlier, Camille and Rune found themselves reflecting on the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't worked late that night?" Camille asked, her hand intertwined with Rune's as they strolled past the fountain where they had shared their first dance as a married couple. "I think about it often," Rune replied thoughtfully. "But I've come to believe that somehow we would have found each other. People who are meant to recognize each other's worth usually do, even if it takes time." "Or maybe," Camille suggested, "the universe has a way of putting extraordinary people in ordinary situations where other extraordinary people can find them." They paused beside the fountain, its lights creating patterns that reminded Camille of the first time she had seen. Rune's eyes light up when discussing complex algorithms. Around them, other couples and families enjoyed the warm evening, many of them beneficiaries of the employment programs that had grown out of their love story, though they would never know it. "Whatever happens next," Rune said, pulling Camille closer, "whether it's Cambridge or Seattle or somewhere we haven't imagined yet, I know we'll figure it out together." "Together," Camille agreed, feeling the truth of that word resonate through every aspect of their shared life. As they headed home to help Jasper research his college prospects and plan their family's next adventure, Camille realized that their story had become something larger than a simple romance. It had become proof that when people have the courage to look beyond surfaces, to value character over credentials, and to choose love over convention, they don't just transform their own lives, they create ripple effects that change entire communities. Their love story, which had begun with a CEO noticing a janitor's hidden brilliance, had evolved into a testament to the extraordinary possibilities that emerge when ordinary people have the courage to see beyond expectations and build something beautiful together. And in conference rooms across the country, in boardrooms where decisions about human worth were being made, in schools where young people were learning about the difference between success and fulfillment, their story continued to inspire others to look more carefully, love more bravely, and recognize that the most important innovations were often the most deeply human ones. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. This one hit the mark. You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.